This brings us to the topic of our next panel, ageism and challenges of an age-diverse workplace. People are born today are inching closer to a life expectancy of 100. They will therefore naturally have a longer work career and retire later. And this means that the workforce will have more generations working together than ever before. And few things are as valuable as experience and having lived through change and multiple variations of change, something that naturally gets acquired with age. Silvia Pavoni, editor of Sustainable Views at the Financial Times, will moderate our next panel that will discuss how we tackle the challenges of an age-diverse workplace, from ageism to bridging the gap between generations. Silvia, over to you.
Hello and welcome to this panel discussion. As you've heard, we are going to look into ageism. My name is Silvia Pavoni. I'm a journalist here with the Financial Times Group. And I work on a new service, actually, of the Financial Times Group called Sustainable Views, which looks at, as you can imagine, all issues that relate to sustainability and, of course, diversity and inclusion are subjects that very much play a role in ensuring that companies, more broadly the economy, is more sustainable, both from an environmental point of view, but also from a social point of view. So this is what we do at Sustainable Views. And here now with me to talk about ageism and understanding what it is and the implications it has on the workforce. We have a list of panelists. So before starting talking about the subject, let me introduce you to our wonderful panelists. We have Gerda-Marie Adenau, who is Global Communication Manager and Strategy Consultant at Siemens. We also have Mirjam Baijens, who is Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer at GRUNDFOS. We also have Cristina Menchaca Garza, who is Operations and Commercial HR Vice President at Aeromexico. And we have a colleague, Yasir Mirza, who is Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion at the Financial Times. So welcome to all for joining me today and talk about this really interesting, but also relatively poorly defined subject, isn't it? Because of course we kind of all know what it is. We know that it has an impact on our lives. Even the World Health Organization has looked into the issue of ageism and found that age does have an impact in the way in which even health services are provided. It has an impact in the legal area, and it has an impact in the way we work in our careers, and of course also in the way that we are therefore able to support ourselves and our families. So before we get into the more practical side of the panel, and by the way, I would like to invite the audience to send us your questions as they come into your mind. I'm going to read them through an app I have opened on my phone, so do feel free to send questions and I'll try to incorporate them in the discussion as they come along. But first, let's try to define what ageism is. How does it look like? And what drives it? Let me go to Mirjam first.
Yeah, thank you, Silvia. I mean, that is a big question that you can look at from a number of angles. I think part of it is maybe also what is driven through our society and also through, education that, because let me rephrase that, because also for younger people, it's sometimes like, well, you first have to do this, you have your education, you need your experience before you can have an impact in a role. So that is ageism also for that group. But then also this kind of model that, well, at a certain age, you should retire. And why is that? And I think that is probably caused, at least the way I look at it personally, through what we've experienced in our societies and the way we've been educated, the way we've been raised, and the way a lot of companies have also been setting up the employee life cycle to finish at a certain point in time. Can we change that overnight? No, but at least that's acknowledging where it comes from will help us to look at what are some of the root causes that we should address. But I feel that a lot of that comes from that angle.
Thank you, Mirjam. Cristina, let me bring you in. How does ageism, what does it look like, and what drives it in your experience?
Thank you, Silvia. I pretty much agree with what Mirjam just said. I mean, at the end, it's related to stereotypes. Some of them could be generated by social beliefs, as Mirjam was saying, education and so forth. But some others from personal experiences that we have had in the past with people we may see as old or young. And I say we may see because it also depends on our age and our own experiences and, of course, perspectives. At the end, our brains rely on established stereotypes for faster processing and decision making. And that's why awareness is so important, because it challenges those kind of assumptions at the end of the day. A reality we face, though, is that the average age of retirement has risen in most countries. So it is something that we do need to tackle as individuals, as organizations, and of course, society at the end.
Thank you, Cristina. So it is stereotypes, but is it also, and I'm going to put Yasir on the spot here, is it also the fact that older workers are more expensive, and so perhaps companies are just being cynical? Obviously, I'm going to go to Yasir, but anyone else, feel free to comment on this.
Thank you for having me. I mean, it's a really interesting question, and I think the answer is a complex one, but it also speaks to the different career journeys and the experiences in life and what stage of life they're at. So it speaks a lot around career motivation and aspirations. I would say, obviously, the longer people stay in an organization, naturally, the more social capital they give back to the organization, and then the more that they would want back in terms of their loyalty. But I think for me, one of the interesting challenges I'm seeing is around the generational shift, particularly if we look at today and Gen Z and what we see around ESG. And how organizations are really talking to sustainability, diversity and inclusion, authentic selves, the career journeys. I think it'd be quite lazy to go into the stereotypes of an older worker not being as adaptable, not having the same career aspirations, or being motivated, and also probably cynical towards this new ESG agenda. So there becomes a bit of a tension of pushing up, and then resistance of change, and where that resistance of change comes from. So yeah, it's a little bit of a complex one.
All right, so it's complex, I guess, to define, although we all are very much aware that there is such a thing as ageism, right? So we know how people look at us and react to us differently, whether they perceive us as older or younger. Gerda, how has it been looking for you? What have you seen in your experience, whether it's Siemens or elsewhere? Give us some examples of how ageism took shape, and what perhaps you've seen done to address it.
Well, from my own experience, and also from stories of my friends and my colleagues, it is a kind like that when you turn 50, you start vanishing. That means you are not longer invited to the big meetings. It means when you show up in a meeting, people don't look at you in this kind of way they did it 10 years before. They don't ask you for career development, for special projects. And sometimes they really address their biases towards you. They tell you that, well, you don't need 1 hour of a career development talk, 30 minutes is enough. They tell you in your face that they won't invest in your career development anymore. And sometimes it's even worse because they even don't tell you that you are old. It's so obvious that you or the other workers who are 50 plus, they don't have to be considered for project staffing or for special career development. And all that's the spoken bias and the unspoken bias that really harms, to the point where the people begin to believe these stories that are told about them. They believe it themselves, and they start behaving like this, and they start shutting up, being quiet, and really started vanishing. And
so there is a perception that perhaps there is a lack of energy or enthusiasm or commitment maybe to future projects. But is it also true that we do change our attitude to work as we get older? I mean, I've also just turned 50, so it's actually quite it's a big moment, right, when you reach that age. And equally, though, we're also seeing, and this brings us to a subject that I know others would like also to comment on. We are also at the stage in which younger generations, so we are told, are more interested in finding fulfillment that is outside of work. And therefore, they also may have a different way of committing, perhaps, to work. Gerda, I'm sure you have plenty of other things to add, but let me go to Mirjam and Cristina and hear their thoughts, and then we come back to you, Yasir. Mirjam.
Yeah, it's, the organization I work for today has a large population that has been there for many, many years. Yesterday, we had a celebration with 80 employees who had been with the organization 25 years, 30 years, or 40 years. So very, very long time. And this was both a mix of blue collar workers and white collar workers. They don't feel old in the sense that we no longer use them, because we've actually also used older workers to try to do mentoring for younger workers, and actually also have younger employees doing reverse mentoring for older employees. But what it says, though, is that phenomenon that people will stay with the company for 30, 40, 50 years for their entire life, that is definitely shifting. And that's what we see also with younger employees, that they sometimes leave not because they don't like the organization, but they just feel like, well, I've been here, already 8 years, and I should get experience somewhere else. And with some of them, I actually personally have very good exit interviews, because they're not leaving with the view, it's a bad organization. They just want to expand their experience. So in those cases, we always leave the door open for those people who leave, because they might come back if they have gained experience somewhere else. But it is a different perspective. They don't join anymore with the view like, I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life. And that is also what is shifting in our organization internally, because we have a history. The company is 75 years old, and that's why we also have a lot of people who've been here for a very long time, but that is shifting. But at the same time, if you can get those two generations working together in multiple ways, you extract the value out of it. Okay,
so we definitely need to talk about how you're getting about doing that. Let's hear from Cristina.
Thanks, Silvia. Yeah, I mean, I've certainly witnessed some ageism here in Aeromexico as well. It of course changes based on different countries, and the population and the demographic itself. But yeah, I mean, ageism at the end, I think I've been a witness of this bias, but it also has different flavors depending on the industry you work on as well. For example, medical industry, of course, we value experienced people, or even in Aeromexico, when you have pilots, we won't be able to, we need people with experience. We need people with certain amount of flight hours to actually live the lives of people, in that flight. So at some industries you value experience, and that could be fact related or not, right? That could be stereotypical as well. Some other industries, for example, IT, you do have bigger issues regarding, keeping older people in your headcount in your workplace instead of youngsters that you would believe stereotypically that would be more technological fluently, right? So at the end, yes, there is a situation we need to tackle. I said the diversity overall, but it depends on the country. It depends on talent availability and scarcity, and it also depends on the industry and the maturity of the company.
So it's very, it's such an interesting point. It very much depends on the industry. And I know we're going to talk about COVID, and during COVID, of course, we've seen certainly here in the UK, I would imagine in other parts of the world, people coming out of retirement from the medical profession, nursing profession to come and lend a hand. So obviously there was a great need for that experience and availability. So that perhaps also helped us refocus our minds on the productivity, for lack of a better word, of older age. Just to let the audience again, remind the audience that you can definitely send us questions, so do feel free to do so. And I will put them to the audience. Yasir, so we're talking about how things work in different sectors. How does it work in media for you? I mean, obviously we are both we work for the same company, and what's your take? I mean, how is the media world in this moment in time? How is it behaving when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and also the way in which it deals with ageism?
I mean, I loved what Cristina talked about in terms of the industry, the maturity of the business and culture. And if you look at our industry of media, is very much about social capital. It's very much about intangible factors on someone's personal brand, what views they have on the world, how they are connected to a really changing landscape. So I think there's the importance on how someone presents themselves and their ideas versus an educational background or experience is different, versus also the real challenges of our industry. We have a lot of journalists, but so few roles, and now we have via social media a lot of other people who have become journalists without training to be. Everyone can write an opinion piece, everyone can comment on certain things that happen in the world. So I think there's the landscape, there's a technological landscape, there's the way our journalism model has changed, having the authority figure being a specialist in their area, and everyone looking to what that individual has to say, to curating so many different voices on the ground. So I think in our industry, the unique challenges are of the ever rapid changing technological advances in social media, so being connected with that. I also do think that we fail to see the value that age and wisdom brings to the how you do things, because we're looking at diversity and inclusion from a wider perspective. We often don't talk about resilience, people's journeys, learnings, and how they've developed and evolved throughout their career. So actually there's an amazing talent or amazing skill set there that we just don't see and tap into. So I think our industry is in a way, it's a challenging one, because it's attracting a certain type of individual from a certain type of background, but it's about putting yourself forward and who can shout the loudest almost to kind of get the attention and be connected to the wider technological world is what's required. So in and of that self, that I guess presents a challenge.
All right, thank you, Sir. Gerda, so is it a matter of shouting the loudest, of making noise to be noticed and not to be put aside? What has worked in your experience?
Well, it's not to be the loudest, but it is that you are present, that you are here, that you speak up, and that you are visible, and that you are active. Yeah, so that you are not stay quiet in the corner and just wait until you're retired. It is a kind of, I mean, this phase, when I turned 55, I really decided to invent myself and to reinvent myself. So I did 3 things, and they had nothing to do with my job, and it had to do with my job. I went into the social media. I started a master degree in business ethics, and I went into a grassroots initiative of my company. It is a coaching initiative. And out of this, I became the project manager of a company-wide project on coaching on employability. I also, when I finished my master degree, now I'm in the working group of business ethics in my company. And this opened doors, and that changed my perspective. And this is my message to the people with 50 or 50 plus. It is just, reach out to the world do what you want to do.
Okay, so that's the first piece of practical advice. Just go for what you may wish to do. Do not be discouraged by the thought that perhaps because you're of a certain age, you shouldn't even consider doing these things, and then opportunities will come to you.
Yeah.
Mirjam, is this what also you would advise, or what other tips would you give?
Yeah, I think it's, with what we just heard as well, with age also comes experience, and for certain roles that is absolutely crucial. Like what Cristina just said, you don't want to have a pilot flying a large jumbo jet with only 2 years of experience. So I think I've personally it has never bothered me so far in my career, because I think it is also the attitude you take to it, because there are a lot of roles where the experience counts, and as long as, to Gerda's point, you keep on developing yourself, you keep evolving yourself, you keep on learning, then it really shouldn't make a difference. If you are stuck in your ways, and that can also be for people who are much younger, if you're stuck in your ways and you want to do it in this way, you're not open to change, then it doesn't really matter whether you're 25, 35, or 55. I see it day to day in my work as well. If you have that resistancy to change, then age becomes irrelevant, because then you will get stuck anyway, regardless of where you are. So for me, it's a combination of staying curious, having that willingness to learn, but also at the same time using your experience to give it forward. I'm working a lot with younger women in our organization to coach them and help them maybe avoid some of the learnings that I had to learn the hard way. And that is, how you can sort of pay it forward and help them move on in their career, but not only with women, also with younger men. But at the same time, I also learn from colleagues of mine who are much older, and who are definitely still fully active, and they will probably work until they drop dead at one point. They for them, it's not work, it's being part of an organization and passing knowledge on and being part of society. So I think the personal attitude that you take influences a lot as well of how it positions yourself in the organization and in society in general.
So a lot of this seems to relate to an individual's initiative. And it is absolutely correct. I think that if you have role models, because that already helps to bring change about, not just on an individual level. But is there anything, Cristina, that companies should look at to change things from an institutional point of view? So without putting the responsibility on the individual.
Of course. Before answering that question, Silvia, I think what Mirjam said about either fostering change or transformation or stopping change or transformation does not depend on a generation itself. It depends on individuals, and I think that's a very important thing to bring out of Mirjam's response. And I think that's something that we need to stay with that at the end. But going to your question, Silvia, yes, I mean, there are two different angles on this. Of course, the individual, and a lot of people have tackled on that already. But there is a responsibility on the individual. If you feel that you have been, if you feel discriminated against, you need to raise your hand. You need to speak about it. You need to be blunt about it. You need to speak to your leader about it and make sure that either things change or, you have a more aware leader, in case that there's some misperceptions there. Now, what about the companies? Companies, we are doing a lot of different things in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're not only tackling, and I'm speaking generally here, but of course I'm talking about Aeromexico and some other companies I know, but we're not only talking on multi-generations and how is that we can bridge the gap. Of course, the more characteristics we give on generations and specifics on generations, we could be even separating or generating more biases unconsciously, right? So if we say, hey, millennials, behave this way and do this and that, then probably we could be pushing towards more biases. Now, again, we are having strong strategies regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, not only because it's part of an ESG, momentum, but also because we are focusing on being socially responsible and making sure that we have the best, and I'm not going to say employee experience, the best human experience, because at the end, what happens in the company ends up, pushing towards different, places such as society at the end.
Thank you. So it would be great to hear from you, Gerda, about the examples of initiatives, perhaps anti-bias initiatives, if anti-bias training has ever worked, but you tell me, or any other initiatives that is helping. And also another question, because obviously what we do as Sustainable Views is we focus on policy and regulation. And regulators have been helping to a certain degree, because we've seen now recently that the US approved gender quotas. And so we're talking about very senior positions at board level of companies, and that surely is going to help in addressing some of the ageism that perhaps women may face in creating, mandating that they sit on those boards. Of course, they could also be people at the early stage of their career, but more likely perhaps those roles require people with greater experience. So I'm wondering again, what initiatives at the corporate level have you, and then of course I'm going to go across the whole panel, have you seen working, and whether certain things should actually be mandated by regulators? Gerda?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I see three approaches. One is that you really start thinking of employability from a company perspective on employability to the very end, to 65 or 67, and that you think about concepts for the period between 50 and 65. There are many concepts who work, and I think there's a lot of creativity in the room. As soon as you start thinking and talking about it, it will appear, and then it's easy to go. The second point is that you really should give, as a company, all generations a feeling of belonging and purpose. I mean, that is nothing new, but it's really essential that you start conversations with all generations on this topic. And this leads me to the third approach, and this is the best way to smash bias is that you create rooms where people can talk and share experience. They can talk about the biases. They can talk about the perception of how they perceive each other. And if you provide these safety rooms. That will help. That's the best way, just to see each other in the way you are.
Okay, so being visible and perhaps creating internal groups where these issues are addressed.
Yeah, you can do that with mentoring, reverse mentoring, with story circles, just with internal panels. And there are also in the project themselves, there is plenty of opportunities in project meetings. Why not to start to have as a check-in a small round where you just share about your experience working with each other.
And do you think, and I know this is perhaps a very much a broader question, but gender quotas, would they help with ageism, do you think, in a way?
Gender quotes?
Yes, gender quotas, yes. So requesting that women are, for example, there is a certain number of women on companies' boards. Would that play a role at all, do you think?
I think that would help immensely.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Let me go to Yasir. Tell us initiatives at an organizational level that you've seen working and what they are.
I think what we've already heard around cultural programs and trainings to really unpack biases for all. I think it's important because we shouldn't be talking about our diversity characteristics and it's singular. It's obviously very intersectional. The sense of belonging and bringing full authentic selves is really key. And I think all what Gerda talked about, completely agree with. I think there's something interesting because we often talk about organizational personas and the different types of a business. So you have a technology part, and you just say from a media point of view, you have an editorial part of the business. And I think the needs and the development and hiring opportunities needs are very different. We talk a lot about early careers initiatives, which is great. That's bringing people into the industry. And I think to Gerda's point, could be something about not early careers, returners careers. And there is certainly a potential there. And do it in a way that provides a reverse mentoring opportunity with early careers. So it's a nice arc in that new young talent wanting to join can learn something from people who have more advanced in their careers and vice versa. And I think that would be a really nice way of thinking of under the war on talent and how we view talent and all of the opportunities that we've got since the pandemic within the world of hybrid. How do we bring people back into the workforce and what value add that can bring? I think there's a huge potential there, along with all of the cultural programs that Gerda has mentioned.
And of course, I can vouch to the reverse mentoring program of DFT because a good colleague and dear friends at DFT is just being selected to be part of it. And I know that any senior board member would be very lucky to have as a reverse mentor. So that's definitely a very interesting initiative. Thank you, Yasir. And Mirjam, so tell us again some examples of initiatives that worked. And also there is a question, perhaps we can incorporate it in your answer, about how do you ensure that more experienced team members remain motivated to keep developing themselves and learning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe to start with the first, this was an example of the previous organization I worked for. We did, and we're trying to introduce something like that in GRUNDFOS as well, is that when people are set to move out of the workforce, at a certain age, also because they maybe want to focus on other things in their lives, that you also help them prepare for that. That it's not, from one day to the next, you stop. You can maybe already go down to working part-time or working 2 days a week, or you work on specific projects. In my current organization, we've been doing that as well. So I think that is also a good way to help people prepare, like, what is it that they want to do? Or maybe they actually come to the conclusion, I want to continue doing more, but in a different way, and not this, 5 days a week type of approach. So I think that is another way of looking at it in terms of helping people also shape their ideas of what they want to do. And then remind me again, what was the question that you got from me?
Sure. How do you ensure that more experienced team members remain motivated to learn and develop themselves?
On the one hand, I'm a strong believer of it's a two-way street. Like as an organization, as we do today also at GRUNDFOS, you offer a lot of opportunities for development, and that goes beyond traditional training, because particularly during COVID, or since COVID, we've become so adept at doing micro learning, virtual sessions, remote coaching, mentoring, buddy groups, peer groups, speed dating to meet other colleagues, not dating, but just to get to know what they do. So you have a lot of ways to provide learning opportunities. I always say it is also, and again, that's what we also have in our learning and development philosophy, the employee should also take initiative. It's not that you're being taken by the hand and we guide you through every step of the way. That was done in companies 20, 30 years ago. That's not how it ticks anymore today, because the individual, him or herself, also needs to be driven to continue to learn and have that curiosity. That is something that you cannot force. But of course, you can also help people maybe get out of an unconscious bias that they have themselves when they think, I'm now 52, I'm 55, I'm done. By no means. So I think it is about providing those different ways to support the individual employee to see what the opportunities are. But in the end, there also needs to be a personally driven motivation to do that, because otherwise, it becomes very hard to make the impact sustainable.
Thank you, Mirjam. Cristina.
Thanks. So in regards of the initiatives we do as a company, we do have, we call them ERGs, which is employee representative groups, and they are led by a C-level, and that C-level needs to connect that diversity specific into their purpose, right? And for it to be tied to their purpose, either, for example, the C-level in the disability track, his son has something to do with disability as well. So it's connected to something that you value way more than just work. And with those ERGs, what we do is we generate open conversations. The first, raise awareness, right, to have those conversations. And second, for people to speak up and say what they really think, what they really need, how they feel, how they want to tackle. And then we make it a matter of all of us, not only the organization or HR or that specific C-level. So that in regards of the first question. Now, the second one, I don't want to repeat what Mirjam said, that is well clear throughout this time that I always agree with her. But at the end, I do think, and we were saying before, fostering change is part of individuals and not generations. So most companies, most of them, are eager for people to raise their hand and say, hey, I have this idea. Why don't we go ahead and do X and Y? You don't need to have all the information. Of course, you can train yourself. Either you do it because there's a lot of information in Google or because the company is giving you a lot of tools for you to do it. But at the end, get into action. Raise your hand. Make things happen. Talk to either HR, your leaders. Believe me, companies are open to actually hearing you and making those initiatives with you.
Thank you, Cristina. Gerda, you were nodding there. Is this what it's like then? Really, people not putting their hands up and asking to get that training?
Could you please repeat your question?
Sure. No, I saw you were nodding.
Yes.
And is this what really comes down to? So people not putting their hands up and asking to be trained or to be involved in your project. So does it really go back to the individual, or is there a blockage by the institution because of institutional bias, maybe?
It is both, as Mirjam said. That is a two-way road. Yeah, it is on the individual and is on the company. So as I'm an individual from a very, very personal perspective, yes, I say, raise your hand and give your spirit in and offer your knowledge. And then when the company doesn't react, but in many cases it reacts and you're welcome and door open. That's also something I experienced very strongly and very positively. But when it happened that the door doesn't open, then it is not the end of the world. Yeah, with 50 plus, you have many, many other options. Then turn around, look into the world. There are enough opportunities and challenges. And today, the world needs all of us, the youngers and the olders. And I think, having this in mind, I think companies and employees together, they can join forces. And I think that would be the best way to go forward.
All right, so as a final couple of rounds of questions, I would like to, so that you're prepared of what's coming, I would like to ask you about COVID. How has COVID changed things for older people or younger people? We mentioned COVID already, but has it made things worse, better, neutral for older generations? And also, as a very final point, if you can think of one advice that you would give, that you would want to give to people listening, it could be find a reverse mentor or join a group. Maybe you can suggest a few groups, or just do one thing, change one thing at work that might help you in keeping, remain noticed and engaged with the company. So think about the one thing that you would like to tell us. But first, COVID, how has it changed things? I mean, has it changed for the, because of course there's been a lot of talk about whether if you're an introvert or an extrovert, how people reacted to working at home, or some were missing the office. Do you think we've talked enough about what that meant for different kinds of ages? And let me go to Yasir first.
I mean, we know about all of the unfortunate and really sad health impacts of COVID. I think from a work perspective, it's really, really interesting. I think from a sociological and the psychological perspective, that our homes and our offices and our work life just merged and meshed together. So you are having a call virtually, people are having access to each other's living rooms, bedrooms in some cases, and you get to see how the circumstances of someone's life outside of work. I think that it was really interesting. The world for many, many years, the world of work really resisted people working from home, and then it became a norm. So it's interesting to see what that culture is now of working in a hybrid world, which I still think is in a very sort of experimental phase, trying to figure out how to do that. I think what ended up happening, what came out of the world, since COVID, is this huge conversation of well-being, huge conversation of care and care for each other, and then identifying signs if employees are struggling. But I think everyone was on rocky terrain on in difficult waters, but we were on different boats. And I think having that empathy and understanding the different challenges, whether you were one person living by yourself, working from home, or you were cooped up in a flat with 5 other people, in a way, there were different types of challenges. Not one wasn't better or less. And I think that empathy and compassion really started to became more prevalent. I think from a work perspective, people started working longer and harder. They you didn't have that separation. Often when people travel home from work, whether you're on a public transport, walking home, or driving, you have that sort of healthy separation from work to home life. That didn't happen, and that actually played out in quite uncomfortable ways for many people, because if you're talking to a colleague, giving feedback, that would often sit with you throughout the night and then the next day. So I think there's brilliant opportunities that have come out of the hybrid world of working. certainly for all generations, people with disabilities, it's enabler for people to work, particularly on different geographical locations as well. But I still think we're still learning with this, and I don't know if our habits will ever go back to how they were, and I don't think we should be asking for that. Actually, I think we should be continually experimenting and evolving.
Okay.
So I would say good and bad has come out of that.
Okay. And the one very quickly piece of advice, just one
quick piece of advice. I would say every single person, find someone who's completely different to you and find out what you both have in common.
All right. Okay. Thank you. And now Mirjam, Cristina, and again Gerda. So we still have 2 minutes. Let's see whether we manage to squeeze your apologies for putting you under such time pressure. If you managed to comment on if COVID has changed anything, and the one advice that you would give to people listening. Mirjam.
So I think a lot has been said about COVID, and we're still, learning. However, one thing is for sure, that the hybrid working is here to stay. It's a paradigm shift. It's not like we go back to before COVID. We're simply in a new way of working. I had this conversation with a number of people last week as well in my organization, and it is not like you go back to something that you did before, because it is really a shift. And other industries, I worked myself more than 20 years ago in the IT industry. We were already working hybrid, and that was so actually when we had to go back into the COVID situation, I think it also depends on the industry you worked in. Some were more advanced than others. However, we have to keep a focus on this element of workload, stress, and engagement, because the boundaries are blurring. And some people might need more help to set those, to avoid that they really burn themselves out. I think that in general is anyway a big topic that we are facing today in every organization and in society. And the one piece of advice, I'm repeating myself, but I think the best thing is to stay curious. And Gerda gave some beautiful examples earlier, that age is not a limitation to start learning something or trying something completely new. I turned 53 this year, and I've started learning another language. I think you can keep yourself motivated by not thinking about the age, because you can also create an unconscious bias and boundary for yourself.
Thank you. Cristina.
Just real quick, because I know we have 30 seconds now, but just in terms of hybrid and change and what COVID brought to the table, I would say just a couple of examples. CEOs that have been very pushy about hybrid work are, older than 60. No, just to keep it there. So it's nothing to do with that generation. Also, we see people that have been blunt about, not being remote work. For example, Elon Musk, that we know in Twitter, he's 51 years old. So again, it depends on the individual. And lastly, a tip of advice, just be proud of what you bring to the table and focus on your uniqueness, no matter if it's based on gender or disabilities or, age, whatever it is, focus on your strengths.
Thank you. And the very last word, Gerda, in 10 seconds, if you manage to.
Dare to dream and follow them.
Wonderful. Thank you again so much. I know we are absolutely out of time, but it's been such a pleasure to talk about something that perhaps we don't really get to talk too much about, at least not in public spaces, but or digital spaces. Although, of course, the conversation seems to be getting some momentum across the board now. So it's been a pleasure really to being with you. Thank you again so much to our wonderful panelists, Gerda, Yasir, Mirjam, and Cristina. And thank you all for listening. And hopefully we'll see you again very soon. And for anyone interested in what we do at Sustainable Views, come and find us at sustainableviews.com. Thanks again.
Thank you, Silvia, and all panelists for an inspiring and enlightening session. on not only the challenges we face in an age-diverse workforce, but also how to tackle these with some great ideas and turn it from being a challenge to an opportunity.